Almost single-handedly, Galen had created a golden age of medicine, and that included plastic surgery. During his time, cosmetic and reconstructive surgery got ever more daring.
The eye is an incredibly sensitive instrument of the body and incredibly difficult to operate on even nowadays. Before Galen, the only operations they would attempt to cure would be a cataract. After Galen, they could try and cure squints, correct droopy eyelids and infections of the eye. And to be able to do that, they must have been not only skilled physicians and surgeons, they must have very delicate instruments and understand anatomically the structure of the eye. Their knowledge must have been vast.
And eyes were only part of it. Fashions were changing, not just in clothes, but in bodies themselves. And in the perception of the body. In the all-important baths, nudity was normal. Under Marcus Aurelius, wars had been banished to the frontiers of the empire, while in Rome itself there were new obsessions, including the human body.
It's almost as if you've got two parallel streams of fashion running along together. Say you take the end of the 1st century BC, you've still got very strongly this idea that we tough Romans, we don't mind being old and wrinkled and warty, because what matters is what we have achieved, not what we look like. We don't go for superficial appearances. And at exactly the same time, you get Romans presented as the body beautiful.
Yeah.
And so you get these enormous contradictions. You get statues of emperors like Augustus, completely naked, with the bodies of Greek athletes.
Yeah.
The men have all those signs that make you manly. The women have all those signs that make you womanly. So you must be soft and unblemished. And oddly enough, despite this pride in Romans having warts and wrinkles, the women don't have warts and wrinkles.
Okay, so they have to disguise the imperfections.
They do.
To judge by the statues, the Roman body beautiful meant the male body. But women's bodies were under public scrutiny too.
There is mention of a woman undergoing a clitorectomy. Now, I can only suppose that she probably had a type of intersex condition and her clitoris was obviously invisibly enlarged to such an extent that it caused her embarrassment, and therefore she had to and was willing to undergo this obviously very painful and bloody procedure.
It's interesting that a number of these so-called plastic surgeries have got something to do with the genitalia. In a world where people appeared so often in public, we have people with both sexual organs wanting those corrected. We have clitorectomy. We have the pec operation. We have also what's called rachosis, or I think probably distended scrotum, which can be corrected by hacking off a portion of the scrotum.
Natasha is surprised to find that nearly 2,000 years ago, such invasive and intricate surgery was even possible. But how many people would have had these operations?
When I think about what we know about ancient medicine, I'm thinking basically that the texts that come down to us are texts by the best people around. And their clients were the richest people around, and that's a very thin element of the population. So in talking about things like, adjustment of male pecs or operations on the genitalia, things of that nature, I doubt that very many people had access to anything like that.
Emperors, of course, were at the top of that top layer, and a young successor to Marcus Aurelius really pushed the limits when he demanded a sex change. Elagabalus was possibly the most decadent emperor in Rome's long history of decadence. According to one commentator, he lived in a depraved manner, indulging unnatural vice with men, deeming the chief enjoyment in life to arouse the lusts of the greatest number.
Elagabalus came from a very exotic corner of the empire, from the city of Emesa in Syria, a city where religions were practiced that were very strange and partly offensive to Romans. So Elagabalus gets the most spectacularly bad press. But of course the way they get at him is sexual. And undoubtedly, I mean, let's not pretend that Elagabalus was a sexual innocent. All the stories about him are about sexual excess.
The story about Elagabalus playing the prostitute was widespread in the literature of the day. These stories have this gossipy flavor to them. They're wonderful stories.
The respected commentator Cassius Dio wrote, "He frequented the notorious brothels by night wearing a wig and plied the trade of a prostitute, committing his indecencies there."
It reflected the concerns that they had, that Elagabalus was a young man who was incapable of fulfilling the masculine role of being an emperor.
This guy called Cassius Dio, he was there at the time, and he says that Elagabalus tried to turn himself into a woman, and that he offered the surgeons any money they asked to give him a vagina.
There's a famous saying by the jurist Ulpian that whatever the emperor wants has the force of a law, and so if an emperor desires it, he has the empire at his beck and call.
But was that operation even remotely possible then? We asked a specialist sex change doctor.
You're making a space that doesn't exist, so you have to find this space, and you have to dissect this space without tearing into the rectum or tearing into, you know, the urethra or whatever. So you know, that's, you don't have a big margin for error. You have to really know what you're doing. What the surgeon probably did is say, okay, I'll cut off his penis, I'll cut off his testicles, I'll kind of hang the skin of his scrotum a certain way so that maybe I can make some kind of a pouch, and that's it.
No, I think it's extremely likely that the story is just one of the stories told against Elagabalus. You can never be certain that any accusation made against any Roman emperor, and they all pick up a whole range of exotic stories, is actually based in truth. But it's very interesting that they could come up with a story like that.
The emperor's depravity and lack of masculinity finally infuriated the populace. At the tender age of 18, he and his mother were arrested by soldiers. They were dragged away and killed, and their bodies were slung into the Tiber. It will remain a mystery whether or not the soldiers had murdered the first and only Roman empress.
Creation of a new vagina is a very difficult operation. We don't know whether it happened or not, but what we can say that even with Elagabalus thinking it or wishing it or even asking for it, it meant that the possibility was there, and plastic surgery had moved onto the stage, that these kinds of thoughts were possible, and these kind of operations might have been possible in the ancient times.
But this flowering of ancient plastic surgery was very brief. A new force was gathering that would plunge all Western medicine into darkness for 1,000 years.